So what we do is get each of our panellists maybe to just start off with a little bit of perspective from their own interest. And I thought we'd start off, Naomi, appropriately with you, because potentially you could be the person, the chief executive, to drive what is potentially going to be the largest IT project in the country's history, potentially somewhere down the track. So give us some context around the complexities of running an organisation like Inland Revenue from a technology perspective.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the welcome and the opportunity to take part in the panel. I think, firstly, the one thing I'd probably say is let's not think about what Inland Revenue might be embarking on as an IT project. I'll come back and talk about what we believe it is, but from my perspective, it's a real opportunity for New Zealand to think about the tax system that it wants for the future, and I use the system in the broadest possible definition of that word. Inland Revenue is an interesting organisation. We think of it quite often as simply being a tax organisation, but a third of the business is actually tax and is actually social policy. So we manage KiwiSaver and child support and student loans and all sorts of things like that. We collect about 55 billion for government. It's not a bad turnover when you think of it in those terms. That's 55 billion a year. And we have about 25 million transactions. Over the past decade or so, we have seen, like most people, the desire from customers, from New Zealand citizens, to do their business with us online. So we're now seeing around 40 to 45% of all businesses filing online, about 93% of individual customers, about 70 to 75% of payments coming in through digital channels. And I guess that's one of the changes that a number of us have probably been party to, is that IT is actually about your customer delivery. It's not simply about backroom systems anymore. And it's very much why, or one of the reasons why, we are thinking about our future and about the changes. We built a legacy IT system in the 90s when, the cloud was something you worried about when you were going to the beach for the day. It's a different world. You know that better than I. So on top of that back-end system that was built for tax, we've built it on social policy, and we've built it on lots of digital things that meet customer expectations. I don't see those expectations changing or getting any less. I see the pace and the desire for a different way to do business with government to simply be increasing. I'm also, of course, involved in the work that's going on in the government ICT strategy and in ensuring we deliver better public services and meet the targets government has set for that digital engagement. All of that's driving us to think about the future and to really think about what type of system do we want and what should we do. From a business perspective, how could customers engage with us? At the moment, if a business files its employer monthly schedule, even if its payroll is run weekly or fortnightly, we ask for it monthly. It's a completely separate process. There's no front-end validation. A lot of the information that comes in is out of date virtually as soon as it arrives, and that leads to all sorts of other problems down through the system. And yet you think what modern software can do, you think what data analytics can do to help you risk assess and understand if actually there are issues in an information supply like that. We are thinking about how would we use some of those modern technologies to build a very different type of tax system and social policy system for New Zealand, one that gives customers certainty earlier, one that makes it easier for them to meet their obligations. And so the conversation we want to have this year with business is about what type of system do we want for the future, and then with people in the IT and other industries, how can you help us build it? What bits of it might be delivered within the department, what bits of it might be delivered elsewhere by other partners or other players. I don't know what that will come from that conversation, but I do think it's an opportunity for us all to think about a very different system. And I guess then when I come to the role of the Chief Technology Officer in that, I want someone who can engage, bring in different ideas, keep us future-focused and thinking about actually where are the opportunities, what might the world look like in 5 years or in 10 years. But I also need somebody who helps me run the business today, because our license to operate comes from ensuring that every day customers can do what they need to do with us, taxpayers can pay, social policy customers can get their entitlements, and the money flows in and out to government. So it has to be somebody who can manage risk, who can help me understand when a system is clunky but still okay, but actually when there are opportunities to do things, even in that today world, that might take us towards the future. So a bit of innovation, a lot of risk management, a lot of creativity, and a real understanding of what drives our business and where our taxpayers and customers are coming from. I'll probably stop there.
Excellent, Naomi, thank you. Certainly some good pitches there towards potential partners and potentially employees as well too. We'll come back and talk more about that. Greg, when we think about Beca, of course, you are midway through a journey that you describe as a series of multi-country businesses trying to achieve some sort of synergy as a global operation. Talk to us a bit about the challenges that you face running a business from New Zealand that is obviously very global in its focus, very large global footprint.
Sure, Andrew, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you here today. Beca today is a business of 3,000 people. It's spread across the Asia-Pacific region. About 2/3 of those people are located here in New Zealand, 500 in Australia, another 500 across Asia-Pacific, but from some very remote and distant locations. A number of locations in China, places like Myanmar, which has obviously some technology barriers in terms of communication and connectivity, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, throughout the Pacific Islands. And so we operate today in around 70, or deliver projects in around 70 countries. And as you say, Andrew, we're moving our business from a collection of country operations, which have been successful in their own right, to becoming a more integrated global business. And so what does globalisation mean for us and for our clients? Well, for us it's about trying to leverage the capability and the power of 3,000 people to focus their efforts on what our clients need, wherever that may be. And so that globalisation brings a lot of opportunity for our clients in terms of bringing skills to bear wherever the work might be undertaken. So, for example, we've just delivered the world's largest seawater desalination plant in Victoria from teams based in Melbourne, Sydney, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch and Tauranga. That included the world's longest underground AC power cable. We've delivered micro-tunnelling projects in Asia from teams based in Singapore. So how do we get that productivity and that connectivity, and how do you get teams working together? The desalination project had a team of 500 people working at about 8 different locations. So how do they work together effectively to be able to deliver the artefacts that our clients need in some sort of integrated format? That particular project had very significant 3D modelling for the main production plant, and that modelling was undertaken in a number of different locations and had to be assembled with quite a lot of interface management. So the benefit for our clients is to be able to harness that horsepower and deliver it wherever the need is. And therefore that creates a demand from our people, and therefore an opportunity around collaboration. So how do we get people working together more seamlessly? They might come from a number of different locations and a number of different geographies, but how do we get them working together seamlessly across distant geographic boundaries? And how do we get federated behaviour? So not only is it about collaboration, which is about communication, but it's about working together. And so that's driven some very significant changes in terms of our global communication technology, both in terms of its volume capacity and the way in which it operates. A big investment in unified communication. Probably 3 years ago, when our CIO, Robin Johansson, said to me that we were going to move towards desktop video conferencing for everybody in our business, I rolled my eyes back and thought, why would you need that? Today, if anybody rings me up and I can't see their face and look them in the eyes wherever they are, I feel uncomfortable. So we've changed the way in which we operate, and we've become a lot more connected as a business. It's also changed not only our technology, but it's changed our premises design. So it means that we're more collaborative and more federated in how we operate together as a business. It brings new demand from our clients. Our clients want to understand what's happening on their projects. They want to get access to our systems, and they want to get access to information about their projects and their project progress, so that brings a whole new dimension in terms of security. Our clients want to come inside the firewall and participate in our business with their projects, and so that brings a lot of challenge in terms of investment and how you bring that together. Our workforce is also becoming more mobile, and so our people want to be able to have all of that functionality out in the field. They want to be able to see their 3D models when they're sitting in the field with the client, and that brings you a lot of new challenges in terms of how do you get that connectivity from a remote location. And so today, most of our people, if they've got an iPad and a Wi-Fi connection, they can get access to pretty much the horsepower of the inner workings of our organisation. So lots of challenges around security, new uncertainties around things like the cloud. You seem more comfortable, Naomi, with the cloud. We're a little bit wondering what it means for our organisation. We see opportunity to reduce cost. We see opportunity to deliver services in a more cost-effective and a higher speed format, but what are the risks around that, and do we really understand that? So we're dipping our toes into that technology as well as we move forward. Where does that leave our technology team? Well, we need our CIO to be a futurist. I think you mentioned that word, and looking out the front window of our organisation. And that's quite a challenge because it's like all organisations, our technology investment is a very large investment, and it needs to be tailored and aligned with our corporate strategy. So our technology team needs to understand our business strategy, where we're going as an organisation, the steps along the way, how we're going to go about achieving those goals, and then helping us to arrive at that destination. But for most of us, of course, we don't know what's possible. So as well as understanding our strategy and looking out the front window, we need our CIO and his team, or her team, to understand the possibilities to enable us to deliver our strategy more effectively and more cost effectively as well. So it's a fast-moving environment. The other area I think that's very important in our business as we become more globalised and our competitors become more globalised is reducing cost of production. And so what technologies are available and what locations are available to enable us to deliver our services seamlessly, but maybe not at the same cost that we do here locally. So that's changing the way our teams work together as well.
All right, thanks, Greg. We'll come back to some of those points. And finally, Barry, you're working in the health sector, healthAlliance, possibly one of the sectors that is being challenged the most by technology, both in terms of the disruptive effect, but also the potential that it offers down the track. Talk to us a bit about the healthAlliance and some of the issues that you're dealing with from a technology perspective within a health context.
Yeah, first, thanks, Andrew, for a chance to speak. And yeah, healthAlliance came together on the 11th of March 2011, just over 2 years ago. It was a grouping of the Auckland DHB, the Northland DHB, and what was the original healthAlliance version 1. Overnight, we opened our eyes, and in front of us, we now had a customer base of 1.6 million people that we support, and 28,000 users across the 4 DHBs. And healthAlliance was then recognised as the largest shop by number of devices as the CIO Summit puts together. One thing that stood out to me when this happened is how do we support the customer? And at that stage, the DHBs were all working on strategies of having patient-centric healthcare. And when you sit back and think, so what does that mean to everyone in the audience? Because I am a patient of this system. And you're talking about patient portals and patients having access to their information. And information being shared between the primary sector and the secondary sector, which actually is a very powerful vision of starting to improve the health sector for all of us and actually being proactive around population health. So visionary, it was great. At that stage when we were formed, there was a regional clinical data repository. So every time you visited a Northern Region DHB, they could share this information of your visit with the Metro DHBs. Northland has now joined that. And they were starting to move down the line of share care, which was getting clinicians across the primary and secondary sector starting to share information around people who had chronic illness, to actually be proactive around dealing with those issues and engaging the families. Secondly, there was a starting to recognise that there was a need to get better interfaces between the primary sector and the secondary sector, and a number of tools around e-referrals. So where are we 2 years later? I like to use statistics. We still have 9 data centres. We have 257 Tier 1 24/7 systems. We have 3 networks. We have 357 Tier 2 systems. And 50% of our outages are still caused by our vendors, directly around the performance of the network. And the DHBs need this 24/7. I think the challenge, as I step back and think about it, was that all of a sudden the real pressures of funding within the public sector came upon the health sector, and if you're under pressure, the one area you start to focus on around cost reduction is IT. And that has happened. On top of that, within the health model, the funding for healthAlliance to do any investment must come from its 4 shareholders. So healthAlliance doesn't have funding itself to advance changes around systems. It must all come through a business case we put to the DHBs. So what I'm interested in my CIO is, firstly, we've got to keep the lights on. Every day we must ensure that those systems in the hospitals are working so that they can meet their targets now set and are being increased on a daily basis from various pressures. So elective surgical deliverables have gone up around 15%. The volume coming through hospitals has gone up around 7%, etc. So these pressures around what the hospitals have to deliver, we've got to support. The third issue, the real challenge for us, is those things that we could control in healthAlliance, we've managed to achieve. So we have rolled out Oracle R12 to the 4 northern DHBs so they're on one finance system, which gives us true visibility around finance, procurement, supply chain. So where you can control the inputs and you can control the resources, you can make that change. Now, you've got to look at me and say, are you advocating that? No. As a shared service provider, all I'm advocating is the real benefits you get from shared services is standardisation. So if you can work out the model collaboratively to get that standardisation across the 4 DHBs, that's when you get your benefits of shared services. If I was looking then forward of how do you start to change things, because I really believe in Einstein's quote where he says, if you keep doing things the same way and expect a different result, you're insane. And that's what we have to change. Then I think the health sector has to step back and say, we have a strategy of how we want to start bringing these systems together, and it's well articulated in the National Health IT Plan. How do we fund it? And at the moment, it's bottom-up funded from the DHBs. So actually, how do you get strategic change around that when you have to do it? The other fear we've got is if you run 2 bigger programs, will they be successful? And everything we now touch in the northern region is a big project. It has to go to Wellington for sign-off. It has to go through the sign-off system currently in place around the public sector. So how do you change that? And the third thing, we have to engage with our vendors, and we've made a real effort now with our vendors of how do we do it differently. We have a funding-constrained environment. How are you going to help us, knowing what our circumstances are, to change the circumstances we're in there to deliver better patient-centric healthcare? Quite a good challenge.
Excellent, Barry. Very good. They should make you the health minister, perhaps, and drive the whole national strategy.
Just give me some money.
Right. Just before I put some questions, we're not taking questions from the floor in this session, but we will be via Shoutbox. So if you want to contribute to the discussion, by all means, fire your questions through, and we've already got a few here, which is great. And also, if you're just reaching into your pocket and discovering that you don't have your car keys, a set have been handed into the registration desk. So if you're missing yours, that's where you will find them. Let's start off firstly with perhaps a little discussion around your relationship with the CIO, which all of you have alluded to in your opening comments, and this idea of how you plan your IT strategy. So talk us through, Naomi, perhaps starting with you, how does that relationship work, and how do you each challenge each other to drive an outcome which is going to be most appropriate for the organisation, and who's in the driving seat?
I guess I'm conscious that I think Miles is somewhere in the room, so you can check this out with him later. For me, it's really important that Miles is part of our senior leadership team. He's on our executive team, along with my other executive direct reports. And it's about the business strategy. It's about starting with what are we trying to achieve, what do we need to safeguard, where are our opportunities, what can we achieve with the funding that we have, the resources that we have, the partnerships that we could make. But it's the conversation that's really important, and it's about understanding our business, the future that we're aiming for with the business, and then very much, as we've been saying, about that two-way conversation of bringing into the organisation ideas and innovation and lessons from other places.
Is this a conversation you're having every day, regularly? How are the mechanics actually working, and how much of it actually represents a large portion of your day dealing with these kind of issues?
Well, I guess in the context of the future that we're thinking about, I'd have to say a large part of my day and week is very much in that space about what might we do and how might we go about it. We also have a reasonably frequent conversation about how's the system running today, how are the various systems that support our business working. So some of that will be a one-to-one conversation with myself, some of that will be a conversation between Miles and the person that runs my front operations. It'll be conversations between him and other people, my CFO, and it'll be a joint conversation amongst the leadership team. So different levels, different opportunities.
So Greg, from your perspective, what are your expectations of your CIO, and how do you work together? How do you to actually collectively drive strategy?
Well, it's a global conversation, and so the nature of our business, and I suppose the nature of our structure, is that it's very collaborative, and our CIO is trying to meet both the enablement needs of our businesses all over the Asia Pacific region, but also chart a future course, and so there is the enablement component really is the operating companies and their day-to-day needs in terms of design technology enablement, communication enablement, collaboration enablement, federation enablement, and where all that's heading together. Now, of course, we've come from a position where we weren't the majority owner of all of the companies that we now fully own, and therefore they started from different technology platforms. So our CIO developed a model of capability, and we looked at where each of our regional operations sit in terms of their technology capability, and then looked to try and achieve a common standard and build those companies towards that common standard. So that global discussion is very important, and we have previously arranged that discussion through an IT strategy group which spanned all of our organisations, involved the IT professionals, the managing directors of all of our businesses, and the corporate people who provide that investment, because our investment, like many people, is really driven by the premises in which we occupy and how they're improved, and the technology we use and how that's improved. So all of our discretionary expenditure is around premises or IT. What we found with that discussion was that we had very good discussion around IT strategy and the future of IT capability and its potential, but we weren't always aligning that with business strategy. And so we've changed that conversation now so that it's much more aligned to the strategy of the business, and therefore the increasing degree of collaboration and mobility, and also the drive towards a more global business, and how we bring the customer into the centre of the business, and how technology enables that, and how technology supports both our people and the customer. So it's still still a global conversation, but it's driven around the strategy of the business and then how the IT strategy is going to help to deliver on that strategy for the business. It's a very difficult task, I must say, because our CIO needs to be involved in a conversation around people with very different needs and very different geographic regions, and yet still try to come to some sort of a consistent outcome. So it's not an easy task, and Robin does a great job in being able to bring all of that together. And of course, we've got people with different investment appetites. So a rapidly expanding mining business in Brisbane is got a very different investment appetite to a low-cost operation in Myanmar. And so how do you bring that technology together in a way that supports the whole business?
Absolutely. Well, Barry, you don't have to deal with sort of multinational issues. Everybody is contained in New Zealand. But what about the collaborative nature? Because you're effectively having to work to present business cases to 4 owners. So how does the collaboration work in that environment?
I think it's a good point, Andrew, a good question. I think it started and there were 3 phases. The first phase and the first discussions we had with Johan were, how do we get the DHBs to partner with each other? For us to be successful, they had to partner and agree. I think the second discussion that we had then, how do we keep the lights on? Because we had to deliver on the shared services business case, and we've actually reduced our baseline by 3.5%, and we had to deliver on that. And the real nut and the crux of our discussions now is, how do we resolve the prioritisation with the 4 customers around this collaboration? And to be fair, it has, and I always say that the CTO in our company has to have a lot of courage and a lot of resilience around those discussions in the health sector. And within those skills, how do you get agreement of all 4 parties to step forward? We did it, and we're working through the process of doing it in 3 ways. The first thing is, we've got to improve our own capability and demonstrate that we can deliver those services 24/7. The second one, we have to convince not only the chief executives and the executive teams, but also the boards of those DHBs and our own board, that we've got the disaster recovery resilience issues under control, and more latterly, the security issue. And security is quite a significant challenge for us today around our portals. And the last one is getting agreement with the DHBs around what are the important projects that we had to deliver. And when we started off, we had a project portfolio of over 500 on our books. Now, I can see the eyes starting to roll in the audience. And we probably had a record of delivering less than 20% of those on time, on target, and I think that was pretty woolly as well. Well, today, we've got the statistics that can start to go back to the DHBs around that performance, and we've lifted project performance up to around 42%. It's not good enough, I know, but by monitoring those sort of key KPIs and being able to take them back to our customers, it lets you at least have a discussion around what's their priorities to go forward. And as you can still understand, the priority must be with their own local DHB rather than collaborating regionally. So they are the sorts of discussions. How do you progress this forward, and where's the resourcing to do that?
Thanks for that.
So can I ask a question here?
Sure.
Is that allowed?
You're
Okay,
quite
all right.
allowed.
So Barry, I'm interested in, you're trying to provide a shared services for some very significant organisations. Do those organisations have their own technology departments, and therefore do you have a collaboration demand on 2 levels? You're trying to get collaboration in terms of the functional requirement of the user, and you're trying to get agreement and alignment between the technology services of the DHBs?
Yes.
That must be fun.
It's particularly challenging, but pragmatically, the customer has to be intelligent. So I think, stepping back, they need their own technology capability inside. What the dilemma is, does that grow too large to be another technology shop? So that's the first challenge. Or is it an advisor internally in the DHBs around clinical systems? So yes, there are some learnings. I think the second thing, if I had to read it, you need good rules. And one of the things around shared services standardisation, if you don't have those standardisation rules, and we haven't managed to collapse any systems, clinical systems in the last 2 years, you lead to greater challenges. And I think that is where the transformation now is in place, where I think there's realisation that we need to come down from 700 systems to 100 systems, which is quite significant, and it needs to be clinically led. I mean, they need to change their process. If you don't have the clinicians leading to say, actually, I agreed to this process, then you might as well have a different system you're putting in to support it. And I think you're at that cusp now where they're going to have to be starting to ask the system. I think the other one we're going to have to ask, which is a New Zealand question, is can we continue to have the GPs sitting outside the health system? And should they not be party to that, because they get a lot of their funding from the public sector, why would you not put it together as a whole system? Now, you increase your complexity, but you then have availability to data to make better decisions, and then to look at things like population health, which I think is the key issue. So I probably sat on the fence on that one, Greg. But it is quite challenging, and it's particularly challenging for the CIO and GMIS.
And you know, to get get right into the nitty gritty here, Barry. So to what degree do you have collaboration and alignment across your DHBs, and to what degree do you have to deal with competition?
I think you deal with competition. I think naturally, because of the current financial environment and how IT's funded, you're in competition. And that's why I've suggested, is there another way of skinning this cat? And maybe if you want to achieve these sorts of things, do you have to top slice rather than be the bottom end of the decision making? We compete with the capital program in every DHB. So to get agreement for funding for projects within the northern region, we have to go to 4 DHBs to get their component for that. I don't think that's an efficient model, and it leads to suboptimal decisions, potentially.
And lots of politics, presumably.
Indeed. All right, I'm going to jump in, Naomi, because that's one thing you don't have to worry about is competition. At least the IRD's a monopoly, isn't it? You know, the collector of the money. In terms of the context of that discussion we've been having, particularly one of the interesting issues that came out of the discussion we had in the split session with Barfoot and Thompson, for instance, have run a model of running kind of marketing and IT together, and the success that they've seen of having that. Clearly, you don't have to worry about the marketing model either, but the idea of collaboration within departments. How much are you thinking in that space about sort of moving out of the silos and more into the collaborative space?
I think it is as important to us as it is to lots of businesses. I actually think the marketing piece is quite important. One of the things that we absolutely know and recognise is that voluntary compliance is the cheapest form of compliance. So the more that we encourage people to pay the right amount at the right time, the more we make it easy, it's better for all of us in terms of how government money is then used. So for us, that partnership's important in the context of other government departments, in the context of other players in the system. We already have a very strong partnership, for example, with the Chartered Accountants and with NZICA. So building collaboration, understanding what they are going to need from a future system, again, will be one of those things that we have to think about as we design it. And I guess that's the challenge of collaboration, because you will have competing views of what a good system looks like, and we will have to work our way through that and balance the costs and the opportunities of those competing views over time.
What about the measurement of your performance from a technology perspective? I had to intervene on a colleague on Radio Live who was in the middle of a rant this morning about the interface dialing the 0800 number on the IRD service. How much do you kind of look at your technology and then look at the performance that you're delivering and try and identify where those gaps are, and then how you're going to try and close those gaps?
Absolutely. So we have some very nice charts on the wall that show exactly which systems are helping deliver what level of customer service across the different products and different channels. We very actively think about actually, have we got further capability and capacity that we can open up at some of our busy periods, April and July being the two peak periods for customer contact and demand, and equally think about how can we introduce new services with technology that helps. So we've just introduced voice ID, voice biometrics, help people get through the security of getting onto our contact centres faster. It takes a little bit of time off every call. B2B links with things like tax refund agents that allows them to come through a B2B link. So it's important to us that we understand where those IT and digital channels are supporting delivery, where there is scope for them to do more, and then where we should and shouldn't invest.
Let's talk about the cloud, because we heard quite a bit about the cloud this morning. And by the way, lots of questions coming through. Keep them, we'll try and weave them into the conversation as we go on Shoutbox, so keep adding them to it. But we spoke about the cloud quite a bit this morning. We heard from our keynote speakers, and one very appropriate comment here: did I hear right, government more comfortable with cloud than a private company? Interesting. Talk about the view of the cloud from the IRD's perspective, and then we'll hear from Barry and Greg as well too.
From my perspective, it's definitely something that we need to start to understand and think about. I don't know that we're more comfortable than you are, but I don't think we should limit ourselves to understanding just what's here today. If we're truly going to think about a transformation that builds the IR system that we need for the next 20 odd years, then cloud's got to be part of that conversation.
Are you aware of other tax authorities globally that have moved into this space?
I think some are dabbling. I guess for me it will be about how we follow some innovation around the space and again manage risk. I don't think any set of ministers would love me if I put their billions of dollars at risk, but you wouldn't go there in one step and in one big flick of a switch.
Do you want the IRD to be innovative? Is that a key driver for you, a key performance metric?
We certainly, hold that up as one of our values. I think it's what we're innovative with and how, and it is not about being so far out there that we're putting at risk something that's fundamentally important to every New Zealander. But there are parts of our business that you could be innovative with quite easily.
Greg, on the innovation space, and particularly around the cloud, how are you wrestling with some of the issues? But in your space, I would imagine that the cloud offers huge opportunities.
Yeah, it does, and I think it's particularly if we start thinking about ourselves as a more global organisation, then regional location of information becomes less important. So we've taken steps over the last few years in-house to make information much more portable, so that it's much less obvious to people if they're federating where the information's stored. So if you've got people working on projects in multiple locations, where the information's stored, how that's accessed, how it's replicated, what the data, the bandwidth issues are around transmitting information or transmitting change information, we've made some significant advances. So why wouldn't you go to look at an opportunity that made that more possible? I think the thing that makes people cautious about that is like everybody, our clients and our organisation wants more for less, and the IT industry has been quite good at delivering that in terms of delivering increasing capability for similar pricing. And so for a similar cost per seat year on year, we get much more capability. But also businesses are very concerned about the risks that come with technology. So any outage in our organisation, I'm sure it's the same in your organisations as well, any outage causes a massive loss of production and has very big financial impacts. And therefore, to what degree do you want to control that yourself, and to what degree do you trust the control of that to somebody else? So where it becomes mission critical, then there's greater tendency to want to keep your hands on it and want to drive it yourself. If it's about near-time storage or information that doesn't need to be available 24/7, well, perhaps that's an area that we can start in terms of moving out into cloud-based technologies. But do we really understand the risks, and is the information that's provided by the vendors real, and so are the performance requirements that are promoted ones that we'll experience as a business? So it's quite a big step to go down that path. So, you know, I would say there's great interest and there's a great attraction to the potential that cloud technology might offer. How do you get started? How do you build up confidence? How do you get management comfortable? How do you get boards comfortable that you're not taking risks that are going to cause you harm along the way?
Are you just starting out on that journey?
Well, I think we've had that discussion going on for about a year in our business. We've taken some small steps into that area, and so we're using cloud technologies, and our experiences have been good. We've been increasing the amount of outsourcing that we do as a business, and that's helped us to become less geographically constrained, but carefully as we go along. We're an innovative business in what we deliver for our clients, and we're a conservative business in how we run our organisation, and that's been a key to our success. So we'll go there quietly.
A good strategy to stick to. Barry, a question for you in terms of the cloud from the audience. Re the cloud and health data. What is the Health Info Security Action Council's latest standard, or latest stand rather?
I'm not really the person to answer that, so I'll step away from that question to ask, would you be happy with your personal medical information
just a quick show of hands on that.
Stored overseas?
People happy with their personal medical information being available on the cloud? Show of hands? Yeah, that's probably
about 50%.
A bit well over half, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the dilemma that we in the public sector and Naomi and to a certain degree Greg's dealing with. I personally don't mind. I think it's a good thing. But stepping back from that, what are the small steps? And I think you've got to have pilots and prototypes where you prove that. So I go back to my first statistic that I gave here, is that 50% of our outages are caused directly by our vendors or third-party providers. So how do we make that experience better? The second is that healthAlliance have put stuff in the cloud and will be soon experiencing software as a service to deliver the Oracle R12 platform. So I think the health sector is prepared to go out there where it has new funding. I think the issue we struggle the most with is how do we do what we currently do and start to move it somewhere else within a resource, particularly a funding-constrained environment. So new stuff's good, and I certainly think you've got to experiment with that. It's how you move the bulk of where you are today with your 9 data centres when the P&Ls and the DHBs are under considerable pressure. And I think, how do we put the business case up to do that? So probably reflecting back, I'm not so concerned around the cloud because it's how you describe the cloud and what parameters you put around the cloud. I think you have to get out there and try it to see how it works and build up the collaboration and partnership. And I think health will need that. healthAlliance couldn't deliver breast screening nationally without a third-party vendor that's based around the country. So I want to say we've had a very good experience with that provider, and we are now rolling out that to provide nationally, and it's been quite successful.
Just a quick jump in there. Also from our audience, why have an IT shared service duplicated with IT departments and DHBs? What is the government thinking?
I sort of don't quite understand that question. The IT, is that the IT services and DHBs?
Yes. Why have an IT shared service duplicated with IT departments and DHBs? Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. In the northern region, they brought together all the 3 IT shops. I can't comment on Midlands, Central and Southern, who still have their own IT shops in each of the DHBs. Far be it for me to say the northern regions move faster than the rest of the country. They may have had an imperative. You've got to also remember that the 3 metro DHBs are only 50 k's apart, so it makes it a lot easier to do some of those things than some of the regional DHBs geographically separated with teams. So we were able to consolidate a lot of those things, which is not so easy if you think around Midland, Central and Southern, particularly the South Island. I mean, really challenging.
Greg, do you want to jump in there? Yep.
Yeah, can I just come back to something that Barry was talking about, and you mentioned software as a service. So I think a lot of the discussion around cloud technology is how do we use cloud technology to improve what it is that we do. Whereas I think the really exciting thing is how will cloud technology help us do things that we can't do today. So things like software as a service, for us there are some pretty exciting things around cloud-based CAD technologies that would either be not possible or too expensive to do through another mechanism. Data analytics might be another area where there's some advances. So where might cloud technology take us tomorrow that it's too hard to go today, I think is the interesting discussion.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes remaining, and the other talking point, I guess, out of this morning, the cloud was definitely one. The other was kind of around social media. And I just wanted to get some thoughts on that. Naomi, I suspect social media, if the IRD was to really embrace social media, it could be a game changer for you, couldn't it?
I guess it depends what we mean by social media. We dabble, again, in that space and are using it very successfully. One of the campaigns we're running a lot at the moment is around overseas-based borrowers for student loans and tracking down folks that are in default, and again have used social media a lot as a way of engaging and communicating and getting some of that message out. So it's another tool in the box. Again, I can't see why government and IRD as part of that wouldn't want to use it. But it's another one of those phrases that can mean quite a lot of different things to a lot of different folks.
What does it mean to you? And do you have a social media strategist within the IRD?
We don't, but it is certainly, as I say, something that we have been looking at and working with, and some of the changes that we've made and are making around the skills that we're bringing into the organisation are very much in that space.
And Greg, in your situation, I suppose perhaps a little bit less relevant because you're more of a sort of a B2B than a B2C type business. But are there opportunities for social media within Beca as well?
There are. I think the first aspect is what does it mean to our people, and you only have to look at your children to understand what it means to them. And I can just relate a story in my previous role when I was running the Beca operation in Australia. So this goes back 5 or 6 years ago, before we implemented unified communications, and we were in the process. We'd implemented an IP-based video conferencing system that wasn't as advanced as unified communications, but was still a big step forward for us at the time. If you're on a video conference in Melbourne at 10 o'clock, it would drop off. And it was always the same, and we tried to understand what that was. And what that was that at 12 o'clock, Auckland would open the gates and allow Facebook for our staff. And so that consumed all our bandwidth. So Robin solved that. We just bought more bandwidth. And we took away those restrictions because clearly our staff are involved in social media communication on an almost non-stop basis. And so, and I think it leads you down, it's still around the path of how people are communicating and working together, and for those of us that are less familiar with social media, like I am, then we have to understand that that's part of connectivity for people as well. So now I have a social media advisor, and we're trying to get our senior people to become more savvy around social media and what they use that for in terms of how we run our own organisation.
Barry, what about within the health sector? Are you thinking about social media?
I think all the DHBs, Andrew, are thinking about social media. I try to think back of what the population that they're dealing with and how most people access it. So when you walk around a hospital, which was an eye-opener to me the first time I walked around the hospital, the average age in the hospital in most of the wards is well over 65. And it was quite an eye-opener for me to go there. And particularly when I go down to Counties Manukau and go into the emergency department, a lot of those people don't have these types of tools where they can access social media because of the socio-economic challenges. So which part of our population can best use social media, and when is it right for the DHB to get there around how they access it? So I think that's the view they've got around it. Generally also, the young people using social media are quite healthy. and quite fit, and they don't need the health system as such. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. I think proactively we should be encouraging them not to come into the health system, to take the pressure off the health system, but I think you've got to keep it in perspective of what value it can add around how we do our business, how we engage with our customers, and get that work. So thinking about it, preventative, health, fitness, better living are all powerful tools which are generated by a range of other social media stuff. But I think in time, as the population starts to get there, then they'll have to take a greater interest.
All right, we're just about out of time. I'll just ask you each for, say, a 1-minute closer on a message to CIOs as chief executives yourself. What would be the takeaway message you would like our audience to focus on as the one insight you would leave them with? And Greg, can I kick off with you?
Well, I think the really strong role that the CIO needs to be playing. I mean, you know, we all expect our CIOs to run technology and to keep our, as you say, keep the lights on. The really strong role is the futurist role, understanding what's possible and helping us to communicate that back into the business and how that can make the boat go faster for all of us.
Thanks for that. Naomi?
I very much agree with that. For me, it's about staying so close to that business and not thinking that you're simply a service provider in the back room.
And finally, Barry.
Well, reinforcing that, and in our particular case, keep remembering to get the DHBs to partner with each other. That's the real value, the collaborative approach to the future.
And putting the patient in the middle.
And moving to supporting them with patient-centric care, which I think is transformational. So how do we enable that? And personally, where I sit, IT is the key enabler.
Because you've got telemedicine and everything which we haven't even touched on yet.
Well, that's been around now, for 15, 20 years. So the tools are being used by the clinicians. The challenge is us being agile enough to meet those needs.
Excellent. Thank you very much for a very productive discussion. I ask you to thank you and show your appreciation. Thank you. Thanks very much.